I think they're both great. You know.
No, it's like
Got it.
and here's my issue. It's not like I have a problem with cats. I just feel and this again, this comes from a very biased place probably. I just feel मैं ना pet नहीं कर सकता बिल्ली को. बिल्ली को ना. That's my own.
Because you're used to petting dogs. You're used to petting dogs. So
I mean,
petting a billy like
you
you
just
know, like it's
they don't
like
give
it's a
they're
dog.
they're like nah, go. They're their own.
But you know, the way a billy plays with you, the scratching is actually them showing you how much they love you. So the more scratches a cat owner has, the more their cat loves them. So
that is काफी Indian movie पे यार for sure. That is
right. A billy's love is very khatarnak, you know, like it's just one of those things.
That is
yeah.
No, for sure. ये खतरनाक प्यार भी मैं कभी बिल्लियों से. I'll try to understand this more. But I have heard this for sure. I have to say though, I think cat owners generally, I feel, are some of the most passionate owners I've seen, because I know people who allergic होंगे cat से. Like उनको cat hair से, they'll be sneezing. They'll be like, nah man, I love this cat. This cat stays. I'll buy a Rectine or something, but this cat can't go.
It's so true. You're so right. Also, I just want to apologize for my halat. I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and I was just making some work, and it's very hot and sweaty, and I'm embracing my need to be hot and sweaty while I work. So forgive me.
Needed. Dana was telling me about it actually before. I was actually curious as well what you're making, to be very honest.
You know, I was making the work, and I decided actually I can't focus on questions and working at the same time. But I'm basically, well, the image you see behind me actually of this dolphin, you can probably see it.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have to coat the fabric first in a type of chemical that makes it light sensitive, and then that's how you make the print. That's how you make the image. It's the same way I made this t-shirt actually. It's like it's called cyanotype. It's a cool process where you use two chemicals, you put them together, you coat a fabric or a piece of paper, you let it dry, then you put like a negative on top, like a film on top, a clear film that has an image on it, or even flowers or whatever, anything that can block sunlight. And then you put it out in the sun, and whatever the sun touches, it becomes a very dark blue color, and whatever the sun doesn't touch remains white. So you end up with it's one of the oldest photo processes in the world. In fact, blueprints, blueprints, like architectural blueprints.
Yeah.
That's all cyanotype. That's the same method.
Same process.
Same process. So that's mostly what my art is. It's cyanotype printing on fabric, embroidery, textile sort of stuff. And I'm very involved. I do all the work myself, and it's very labor intensive, and I like labor intensive things. I like feeling like I'm doing something useful with my time and energy. And also I like learning. I like learning how to do these things. So yeah.
And how long have you been doing this? Like as far as I know, you've been an artist most of your life.
Yeah, well, I guess spiritually, yes, I've been an artist most of my life, definitely. I've been an artist, I've been a professional, in the art world's a very weird place, and it has its own problems, but in art world terms, I've been a practicing artist now since I guess I left school, so that would be like 2015, 2016. I've been working and exhibiting. And I've been pretty much doing textile the whole time, but I didn't learn textile in school. I actually learned I self-taught myself textile because my work always referred to Pakistani textiles, especially like Pakistani, Sindhi specifically, embroidery and printmaking and dilli and patchwork and quilt making. But I never actually made anything. It was always a reference point, And then then after graduating, you know, you're sort of like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And at the time I was living in the US, and you know, I wasn't quite ready to come back home. So I was also, you know, and of course home was saying, well, if you're not coming back home, then you got to figure it out for yourself. So I was looking for work, for jobs, for all of these things, and also trying to make my own place within the art world. So it was quite a learning experience in general, and I think I was open energetically to a lot of different things. So one day I just picked up a needle and thread and kind of just started working. Then I discovered that you could print on fabrics and what are the different ways. So I did a digital series on fabric, then screen print, which is the same method that most t-shirts are made, or used to be made. Actually, now people use a sort of digital heating press system. But I learned screen printing. Then I learned this type of method, cyanotype. So printmaking and textile are my main kind of things.
In terms of, I can be wrong. In terms of generally, my knowledge is not a lot on these things, so I might ask you a lot of questions. So for my understanding,
that's okay.
This is the form that you take. This is like textile is kind of an art form, but the topic itself can vary, though, right? The topics itself you choose to print on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the first body of work that I did was it was the first proper like project, a long-term project I did in textile. It was called Musalman Musalman. And I had found in Lahore, in this old used book place on Mall Road, a translation of an Arnold Schwarzenegger exercise book. It was an Urdu translation, Urdu tarjuma. And I saw this book, and it was just amazing because it was just like proper, like beautifully written Urdu, proper Urdu. Everything was translated to the T, not an English, unless there was absolutely no possibility they would use English, but there wasn't an English, you know, sort of replacement in sight. And it was just so beautifully written, and there were photographs in it that were so big and vibrant, and it was Arnold Schwarzenegger on like 5 or 6 other big buff hunky models. And I was living in the US at the time, and I remember having an argument with someone when I was in grad school in a class when they saw my work, and they said, and I used Sindhi script. I was using Sindhi script in a photograph. I was painting with it, and they said, "Oh, this is not universal because I can't understand it." And it was like, well, then how are people judging universality? Do we judge what is universality? What is this idea of what is universal? What isn't? You know, and what we as South Asians and Pakistanis would understand. Of course, we don't necessarily expect the entire world to understand, but Americans do.
They do.
That's the problem.
And I would also say a lot of these things that we deem as universality are being forced on us, have been forced on us for generations, and they have become now the norm, but doesn't make it
for centuries, for decades, for generations. And whether it's popular culture, whether it's language, whether it's manners, whether it's etiquette, whether it's clothes, whether, you know, it's all, you know, and it's all been forced on us. And the US now is the what they believe is the cultural hub, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, it was really interesting. I was talking to somebody, I think last year, last year. Anyways, I was like, I had never been to New York. So a few years ago, I was like, I wanna, you know, go to New York. It's just, it's like I'm so close. I was like, I'm in Toronto. Why? I need to go. So मैं चला गया, and उस वक्त हो रहे थे elections वगैरह. But मेरा सबसे जो मेरी interesting चीज थी, even before going to New York, I knew New York because my whole life was told कि यार aliens भी New York आते हैं, Avengers भी नहीं हो, superheroes भी New York आती हैं, सब destruction दुनिया की New York होती है. So by the time I reached New York, I was like, yeah, I know this place. But
I know New York. Yeah, totally. No, I totally get what you mean. I totally get what you're saying. And that was something I remember when that person said that in that class, that like it's not universal because I don't understand it. I remember being so upset that I decided to make an entire body of work in the Urdu script, but what became important, and I think this is what artists, when people are like, oh, what is, I don't know, art is a complicated thing. It's not any one thing, but I do believe that in order to be somewhat of a successful artist, you need to give access points to your audience, right? If you want to be an artist that's working in the world, you have to give them access points. Now, when I say access points, what I mean is ways that they can immediately get what's happening, right? And who gets what? Who do you give the privilege of understanding your work to? And for me, I wanted to privilege a Pakistani audience, despite the fact that I was in the US. But I still wanted people in the US to get it. So the bodies of the Muslim man, along with the script, was the access point, because this was peak Islamophobia in the US when I was making this work. So someone even said to me, like, oh my gosh, like, I love that you're challenging Islamic norms, and like, I love that you've put verses of the Quran next to these bodies. I'm like, literally, it's telling you how to do a push-up. Like, don't, like, it's not that deep. So, and I think that for me is really, really fun, I have to say. And I kind of went with it for a really long time. And I did another series on fabric. So one was Mussulman, and then the other one
man,
was...
I love the name. I love the name. Mussulman. I think it's an amazing name. It's like a superhero name, right? Mussulman.
Yeah, it's a superhero. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Mussulman. And then the second series was Tomorrow We Inherit the Earth, and I had an accompanying film series to that. And then now the third series is Bulhan Name. Bulhan is the Sindhi word for dolphin, Indus River dolphin specifically, which is a species unique to Pakistan. I think it's interesting. A lot of people in Pakistan really are like, oh, markhor. And I think markhors are beautiful animals. But, there are markhors in Tibet, there are markhors in Pakistan, there are markhors in Afghanistan, there's markhors actually in a lot of our neighboring countries. But the Indus River dolphin is only in Pakistan.
And they're blind, right? The dolphins?
They are blind. Yeah, they've evolved over millions of years to have no need for sight. So they actually don't even have retinas. They don't have lenses. So you and I, if we were to compare our eyes to cameras, we have like an HD, like, DSLR, like full range spectrum camera in our faces, right? Those are our eyes. We can focus, we can kind of zoom in if we want, we can see in color, whatever, all of those things. But what dolphins have is just a little hole that receives some light. So they can tell the difference between what's light and dark, meaning what is the top of the water and what is the bottom of the river, right?
Yeah, below.
So that is essentially what they can see. But what replaces their sight is their brain, their skull, has all these hollow points inside. The head of a dolphin is called a melon, right? Because it's very, very big, so it looks like a melon. So it has all these holes inside. So what happens is that the dolphins making constant sound constantly. They're constantly making a preep, 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 preep sound that's almost like a sonar, right? It's like a zip sound. And they're making this sound that we can't read, that we can hear very minutely if we were to put a microphone in the water and we would listen to them. But they use this sound, and it bounces off objects in front of them, and the hollow spaces in the skull, it vibrates inside, and it creates a literal image in the brain of what's in front of them. So it's so interesting. They teach us so much about diversity of sight, that sight isn't just visual, sight is so many other things. And the way that they see the world is through vibration, which I think is so amazing, actually. If you think about it that way, they're seeing the world through sound, through how sound vibrates within it. And that echolocation that the dolphin uses, they can tell the difference between not only a dead fish and a living fish, but a dead fish and a fake fish. This has been experimented with. They can tell the difference between like a dummy fish and a real dead fish, which I think is pretty amazing. I'm very nerdy about this, so I think this is fantastic.
I think it's really interesting because, like, so a few days ago, it's just, you know, when you go on these, it's like, you start thinking about something and you go deeper into it and start watching a lot of YouTube videos. So I went on this one kind of indulgence into, I was just watching something about just how big is the universe and stuff. But there was this one thing I realized, I'm like, but you know, sea hasn't been explored as much. Ocean is one thing that has just not been explored at all. So I was just reading about it, and there is so much we don't know. Okay, we know like there are certain levels in this Mariana Trench, and sure they're still there, but really we don't. We haven't even spent enough money to investigate whatever is in the sea and how we can, I don't know, use it. We're more worried about going to freaking Mars. And I think that shows a little bit about human beings as well. We love the outside. We're very much about this outside persona. We don't give a fuck about what's happening inside, or if we want to save inside.
It's true.
It's true. I don't know.
We're very obsessed. You're right. No, we're very obsessed with, we're very obsessed with distraction. We love distraction. We love distracting ourselves. And I think this is something that might undo us, you know, as the world goes closer and closer to climate catastrophe. And now in Pakistan, we're seeing these huge shifts in climate. You know, it was, you know, just a few months ago, it was our driest year in 6 decades, and now we're seeing the worst, some of the worst rains in the history of Balochistan, the history of Sindh, in the history of the Saraiki belt, and also even in the north. You know, we're seeing all of this sort of tremendous climate catastrophe happening. And not only that, we're seeing the impact of how we've treated our world. And if we were to zoom into just Pakistan, for example, you know, not just the world, we go just to Pakistan. The Indus is so angry at us. The river Indus is so angry at us that as soon as she gets even a little bit of water, she wants to break every single one of these dams and barrages and bridges and everything that we've built to control her. You know, there's a rage in her. And these climate catastrophes really prove that.
And where do you think we, as, like, I feel no government in Pakistan has really cared about the environment. I think the world governments also don't care, unfortunately. And I think the people who do is more of a gimmick than anything else. It's more like, hey, we're doing this, but we're at the same time going to pollute this much. But hey, just, you know, talk about this part that we're doing. You know, like Nestle will also talk about, you know, a lot of these companies also talk about so much environment, but they are the worst.
Yeah. But they don't do anything.
They don't react, right? And here's my question, like, where do you think, because now it is becoming serious, like we see what is happening Pakistan वगैरह में बारिशों के अंदर मर रहे हैं, मतलब पता लग रहा है कुछ गलत है, कुछ, you know, there's something environment नहीं चलती. What should the government be doing? What is the biggest problem? Like, क्यों नहीं government करती? What is stopping them? I would imagine यार, इतनी मेरी जो भी हुकूमत है, जैसी भी है, वो जो मर्जी है, उसके ऊपर इतनी सहूलत है कि दे हैव रिसोर्सेज टू पीपल हु नो कि यार मुल्क में जनरली हमारी फॉल्ट लाइंस क्या है, एनवायरनमेंट क्या है, अर्थक्वेक के लिए कैसे प्रोटेक्टेड है, आगे इस जजमेंट डे कमिंग, इज, you know, Armageddon, how soon is Armageddon and stuff like that.
You know, this is an interesting question. As you know, I don't want to sound like I'm an engineer or a whatever, because I'm not. But you know, one thing that you know, the government is doing things. We shouldn't, you know, obviously there was the tree tsunami thing, the mangrove project thing. And the mangrove project thing was an interesting one because it revealed a major fault in the thinking of the establishment, right? Which is we're going to plant a bit like 1 million mangrove trees. But mangroves need a mixture of fresh water and salt water in order to properly thrive. Now, the reason why this is a problem is because the establishment does not allow water to go from the Indus River to its delta for 8 months out of the year. So 200 kilometers of the Indus River from Kotri Barrage all the way to Katie Bandar is dry for 6 months out of the year. And yet at the same time, they wanted to plant 1 million tsunamis. Sorry, 1 million, not tsunamis, I'm sorry, 1 million mangroves. But of course, okay. So let's get down and dirty. Just like what is it you want to know, or should we just continue on our tangent?
So for me, one thing also, like, definitely I want to talk about the climate together as well, because I feel nobody really talks about it, man, to be very honest. Like, कोई बात नहीं करता. So I think it's so important कि कोई तो कर रहा है, like, it's important to highlight even, like, वरना सभी मर जाएंगे.
अब तो हम शुरू कर रहे हैं, मतलब as a country तो हम शुरू कर रहे हैं. For example, I was in this exhibition at Kuwail, and all the artists were talking about climate change, and I think this is something that if has become so urgent that people are genuinely scared, or if they're not scared, they've lost hope, right? So
that's not also good, losing hope.
Yeah.
So I guess it's a mixed bag. I also feel sometimes, like, as a nation, we're not that. I know it's interesting. We like to criticize other people, but as a nation, if we look at ourselves, we are not self-critical people. We don't.
No.
We don't. It's something about it. We actually get defensive when being criticized on our identity or anything. We're like, no, we're not gonna. There's no faults, nothing, everything great. Pure as they come.
Right.
That's been a big problem, but. Leading from that, I also want to know from you, as somebody who is part of a political family, but chose I would say a different path. Sure, and I want to talk about how politics or interaction, and even religion to an extent has been in your art, and how you have mixed all these together, and how has that shaped your journey. But I also want to know more on that journey front. You're from a political family. You also faced, hardships. What happened to your dad? What happened to your chacha? It's like, not many people in Pakistan have gone through that, especially people who come, who are part of a political setup. And it was really interesting. I read in your Voice of America interview था कि यार sacrifice देना क्यों जरूरी है, क्यों है ये हमारे अंदर के हमने ना शहादत देनी है. ये एक बड़ा मतलब मैंने एक पूरा प्ले भी किया था बड़े अरसे पहले. इस पे अबाउट एक शहीद के ऊपर था, बट उसकी अब नहीं वैसे वो हो सकता. आई थिंक प्ले है, मुझे ये पार्ट एडिट करना पड़े. बट वो शहीद के ऊपर ना, वो बेसिकली बंदा अपनी ऑल्टर ईगो से ना बात कर रहा था, एज इन शहादत की बात करके, मुझे क्यों शहीद होना है, क्यों, what is this reason that I need to do this, why, is it actually doing something good in the end? But just want to know your journey as an individual. How did that change you, shape? Because I feel these kind of things do shape people, change people. That is what make us. These are the experiences that make us as individuals. Hamare sare thought process. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So you brought up a few things. No, it's okay. I'll as the inspiration comes. So I mean, I'll address, of course, first shahadat. At the time of the Voice of America interview, of course, I was living in the US, and my relationship to Pakistan was very different. And I just want to say, of course, I honor all shaheeds. And I respect all shaheeds, from my father, Shaheed Mir Murtaza Bhutto, to all of those who have sacrificed their lives, the unnamed heroes of our country, and many others also. And the word shaheed, I think in Pakistan we take it religiously, and of course there's a spiritual element, but it's an Arabic word, and it means martyr. It's not a religious martyr. In Lebanon there are many Christian shaheeds. We have Shaheed Bhagat Singh also. Shaheed means witness. actually, and that's one of the names of Allah as well, Al-Shaheed. Ash-Shaheed, sorry. And Ash-Shaheed, we're not saying Allah is the martyr, of course not. We're saying Allah is the witness. So a Shaheed is someone who has witnessed the truth. And when you witness the truth, and this is not necessarily the Arabic definition or the Islamic definition, but this is my take on it. When you've witnessed the truth, the world, the realities, the systemic violence of the world cannot allow you to exist anymore. It has to bury you. It has to silence you. Once you start speaking the truth, the violence of the world has to silence you. And I think this is the problem with Pakistani politics. And this is what I have seen growing up since I was a child, is that yes, I understand people are not perfect. But those members of my family who did sacrifice something, and I think especially of my father, they were uncovering things. They were uncovering systemic issues, and they were getting a little too loud. And the political system here is not built for change. Unfortunately, the political system in Pakistan is designed to punish the victim and reward the perpetrator. And I say this, some of the best examples are the blasphemy law and the Hudud ordinance. And what these laws are designed specifically to put minorities, and I don't mean minorities just religious, I mean minorities, women, queer people, etc. They're designed, these laws make the system so that it's designed to punish those who are victims. And this has unfortunately become a culture also in Pakistan as well. And I really think we need to start empathizing with the minority figure, with the underdog. And minority doesn't just mean the person who's less in number. This word minority is a political term. It means the person who has less power, actually. Right? And that's why minorities have certain special privileges, because we recognize that we have robbed them of the same kind of power that the majority has. And the majority is not a numerical thing. It's not those who are most, it is those who have most power. And I think Pakistan really plays on the majority-minority thing in the political spectrum. And those who try to change that are silenced. So for me, it's not that I'm scared of death or I'm scared of martyrdom. It's more so that I understand the system's not designed for change, unfortunately. We as Pakistanis have to design our own change. We have to stop waiting for the political system to change through elected officials. The system needs to be the system needs to be changed, gutted from within and changed entirely. We as the Pakistani people have to redesign it. And I think for me, the way that I choose to redesign it right now is through art. And I recognize that art may not be changing laws, it may not be changing policies, it may or may not be helping dolphins, but it is a language. And it is a language that begs for change, and it is a language that speaks to truth, at least the truth that I see. So yes, to answer your question.
No, that makes sense. And till now though, 'cause I do know you have taken some like stances where I believe you refused to work with a certain creator as well, because of their stance against Palestine.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I would want to know with what has happened, and this brings me to the second part of this as well. And I know you have also, from what I've seen, is that you also have some religious connotations to your art as well, or they're part of it in some way. And what is happening now, jo ab ho raha hai, especially when you see with the Shia community, what is happening abhi Pakistan ke andar, and it's been happening for some time. I feel it's not कि
With
एकदम
the
से-
sorry, with the Shia community, is that what you said?
yeah, with the Shia community.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what is happening is like, और ये काफी अरसे से हो रहा है, there's been killings and stuff. But I see what is happening now though. It's being, it's like this, this with the TLP and this wave, जो बाकी एक दूसरी, extreme Sunni वाली और Barelvi and all that, वो जो एक wave है, वो ज़्यादा strong होती जा रही है. And and पहले बातें होती थी. I remember there was a time few years ago, and it's funny enough, मुशर्रफ के टाइम में, डिक्टेटर के टाइम पे हदूद ऑर्डिनेंस पे बात हुई थी. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember. I do remember. Yes, I do
अब आप
remember.
सोच भी नहीं सकते. It is Pakistan is such an interesting country. Like a dictator के टाइम
Yes.
पे हुई थी बात. अब आप सोच भी नहीं सकते.
It's topsy-turvy for sure.
It's like literally a roller coaster, right? Like wow, this doesn't
Yes.
make sense. It's like the multiverse. Like this doesn't
Yes.
like.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
But yeah, how do you? I'm sure you have opinions on what is happening right now to the Shia community. That's and generally I want to know, how do you tackle with that? And generally, what's your opinion? Like I know we discussed that change नहीं आ सकता Pakistan. हमने बनाना है change. But what is that change? What does that change look like? Like how do we start?
Right.
I feel a lot of people, we sometimes say this, and there's spoken language, but there's no. It's more confusing when you even think about it. You're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that's a very good question. I think and it's definitely gotten worse with time, especially with the Shia community. I remember as a child, out of just simple pure respect, no eatery or cafe or restaurant would play music during the first 10 days of Muharram. And it's not like anyone asked for it. They just wouldn't, because it was just not okay. And now like no one, I mean, I don't know. It's oops, sorry.
It's
I think
just add to this, it's interesting. Somebody like my dad used to tell me, is के मुझे बता दे कि यार देखो वो पहले they also used to be मुहर्रम में सुन्नी, उसके अंदर भी there used to be majlis वगैरह. It wasn't just
it wasn't just a Shia thing.
it was like majliसें हर जगह होती थी. And along the lines, obviously, this changed, right? And
some of the biggest majlises in Sindh, some of the biggest majalis in Sindh are hosted by Hindu families still, because it's a proud thing to do, because I think what's most relatable in the time of Muharram for people, whether you're Shia or Sunni or Hindu or Christian, is the idea of sacrifice, right? Of completely selfless sacrifice, and the helplessness of the Ahlul Bayt, and just how much they suffered, and how can you not relate to that, right? And this is why we say Kul arde Karbala, Kul yawmi Ashura. Every land is Karbala, every land is Karbala, every time is Ashura, because there is injustice everywhere, and every time is a time to fight against it. And this is actually something that I think makes the Shia faith very, very relatable to the Sikh faith as well. Shias have we have the 12 Imams. Sikhs have 10 gurus. And half of those gurus were martyred; they were shaheeds. So, and so Sikhism says the same. Actually, Sikhism says every Sikh must be a fighter of injustice. So I mean, we have these interesting parallels, which is why there's this content creator on Instagram and sort of academics. The Singing Singh, Harleen Singh is his name. And he actually talks a lot about the similarities between Shi and the Sikh faith, and he comes from a family that actually did have Husseini practices. And that's the thing, you can even distinguish between Shiaism and Husseini, right? So our family, for example, is half Sunni, half Shia, but even the Sunni side practices Husseini, meaning we have Sabil during Muharram, meaning we keep Shia names, meaning we all have an alam on top of our house. And the persecution of the Shia community today, you know, I will, you know, I don't want to say too much about it because it's not something I'm super well educated about, but I know that it's something that scares me, you know, and it's something that is frightening also because many people like to deny it. People like to deny that there's an oppression of Shia people. People like to deny that there's a certain inequality in the religious landscape of Pakistan. And of course that's not true. But I, you know, I don't want to speak on the topic as if I were an expert either. So I think that's all I can sort of lend to your question.
No, thank you so much, Zulfikar.
Of course, my pleasure.
For being on this. Now I can let you go. But let me just
thank you. Thank you so much for this interview.